What we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking our ogre character that we used in rigging DVD number 1, and part of the rig that we used, just the legs that we set up, that had a foot roll controls added to it. I've deleted the spinal column that we used because I'm going to be rebuilding that spinal column using Spline IK. I've added layers to this file as well to break it down. The mesh is on a separate layer. I want to pick object properties, make it see-through, and leave it as frozen so that we can't select it. This way we can see what we're building with, but don't have to actually be in wireframe to do it. Now the spline of the character is going to run all the way up through the back, up to the base of the neck. I tend not to carry them up into the head, because if you do that, when you adjust the head, you start adjusting the shoulders. I like to isolate it a bit more. You'll see what I mean later in the section. To start with, I want to start with creating a spline. And I want to set them to smooth to start with. And I want to create 5 control vertices on this spline. Those control vertices are set at points where I want to get control over the spline. You can make this more complicated. You can add more of them if you like. I do in further rigs, but for this rig I'm going to try and keep it as simple as possible so we can follow it. We're going to have a control that'll control the bottom of the spline, the waist area, and the top of the neck, or the top of the shoulder, sorry. Allow me to show you what happens if we use Spline IK and max. And I'm going to create a set of bones. Make them much smaller to start with, maybe the size of 2. To apply Spline IK, the built-in version, you pick the root bone of the chain, go to Animation, IK Solvers, Spline IK Solver, pick the top of the chain, and then pick the spline, and it'll jump the bone chain to it. If you notice, it also hasn't resized the bone chain to fit the spline. It adds, on the spline itself, it adds a Spline IK modifier, and adds control helper objects to the spline. What this allows for you to be able to do is grab the controls and be able to pull the vertices of the spline around. I'm going to turn it on to no linking for the Spline IK control. This is fine and all, but what you'll notice with the Spline IK, if you ever go to use it, is there's flipping that can happen. And that usually happens when points of the spline pass 90 degrees of others. It becomes uncontrollable, and you can't actually stop the bones from flipping over. And you can see that happening here with the second from top bone as it flips over when I pass 90 degrees. This is impossible to control or stop in max because of the way the Spline IK is set up. Another problem with it is, going to the motion panel with the solver selected, is there's a start twist angle, which twists the entire bone chain, and an end twist angle. Now using this you can actually get it so you get a twist at one end and a twist at the other. But that's it, unfortunately. You can't control the twist of this bone in the middle individually, or any given bone in the middle of the chain. You can't twist it from the center out in both directions. So you're kind of limited as to what you're going to get as far as a setup for your bones. I'm going to delete the IK solver